And I also love to throw it to you, Julie, the January 6th. Oh, the police opened the door and let people walk in the building. Terrorism.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they got a strong definition, don't they?
And when protesters literally broke down the barriers in front of the White House and were setting fire to the church across the street from it, that was not an insurrection. That was not terrorism. The president of the United States had to be hidden away in a shelter, but that was not terrorism or an attempt at an insurrection.
Right. Well, in here, it's not just Reddit posters or whack jobs who are randomly saying that this is terror. You have our FBI director, Christopher Wray, who has designated January 6th as an act of domestic terror. They are comparing January 6th defendants to terrorists. And so when you have this codified by your top law enforcement official, then of course that is how it goes mainstream. So you have Democratic lawmakers or even judges just say, well, they were terrorists. This was a terrorist attack, and these people are terrorists. So then everybody becomes a terrorist, right? Except for the actual terrorists, the people who burned down cities and, to your point, $2 billion in damages. The FBI has arrested 3 times as many people related to January 6th than they have the entirety of 2020 rioting, which is insane. And you have Chris Wray still lying about it, saying, we're handling both events equally. When we can't read and we can't pay attention to actually what's happening.
Just think about that for a couple seconds. You have people who caused, when we say $2 billion in damages, that's the maximum the insurance companies would pay out. It's not even the total amount. The damages could be way higher. When you have estimates ranging from 26 to 32 dead in these riots, they burnt down a police station and the police were forced to flee. For 3 months, they were firebombing a federal courthouse. And there's no terror declaration. There's no law enforcement to stop that.
They're dismissing charges against those people. They've already dismissed about a third of the charges related to Portland.
Just think about that for 2 seconds. And then you have, the MAGA Meemaw types who went to the Capitol and the police removed the barricades. The police did that. And you see one cop fanning people. They walk in. Now, there was conflict at the tunnel. People were fighting, and we had Richie McGinnis on the show. He's a journalist who was there. People were shoving with cops and fighting with them, yelling stuff. Yeah. But then you have people who are walking up to a door. The police open the door, and one cop can be heard saying, I don't agree with it, but I agree with your right to protest. As they all come in, walking and bumbling about, the MAGA Meemaw types, they're the terrorists. Madison Cawthorn spoke at a rally for President Trump. Far away from, relatively far away. And they're claiming he was he was involved in the insurrection. And the media is on board. And our law enforcement apparatus is on board. When you have these two very two distinct circumstances, you need to start realizing that they're at war with you, that they want to destroy your life. And what I mean by they, I mean there are elements in the FBI, not every single person, obviously, but you look at the political landscape. There are powerful connections between media and Democrats, and I'm not speculating. We've got the CNN story where the woman who worked for Andrew Cuomo then became chief marketing officer at CNN and was hooking up with the president, and that whole scandal happens. They're obviously colluding in big tech as well, and they want to ruin your life. They hate you.
And you just have the news this week that a top national news editor at the Washington Post has to recuse herself from her job, from her position, because she's married to the chief of staff to the FBI director, Chris Wray. So think about, the incestuousness. So you have a major newspaper who has lied about Russiagate for years and now is covering up huge stories like the Whitmer kidnapping, FBI kidnapping plot, and certainly has a huge spin on what happened. Ray Epps, that's a conspiracy theory. This is the Washington Post. And then you find out she is married, a top editor married to the chief of staff to the FBI. Her name? Matea Gold. So this was a great Paul Sperry investigative piece on Real Clear Investigations, and he details the whole thing. And this man's father is tied to the Clinton machine. Like it just,
it's a big club, and you ain't in it. That's for sure.
Right. You don't want to be, right?
No.
As George Carlin said, it's the same big club they used to beat you over the head with.
Right. Once they get you in, they want to keep you in. That's why I don't want to get in. I'd rather do it from outside.
They're losing. They're losing.
People don't act this way if they're winning. People act this way in power when they're losing.
The desperation is
that's right.
Like raiding James O'Keefe, the FBI raid on James O'Keefe. I'm just like, wow, you got to be really desperate to pull a move like that.
You do. And I mean, I think that's one thing that our side or whoever side needs to realize. And I talk with this, like people, our friend Lee Smith. When you are a political party and you're in charge, you don't act this way if you are winning over the masses, if you're convincing them. Even 30 years ago, if you're a Bill Clinton and you're charming and you're trying to actually bring people together, or at least win office. But this is actually the last gasp of the left, of the radical left. They're desperate, and this is why they are calling people terrorists. That's why they're rounding up Indiana Mimas. This is why the media is so corrupt, and it's all falling apart for them. They think that they're convincing us that they're winning, but they're actually losing. And so that's why it's going to get worse before it gets better.
I've heard that a lot, Mima. Like, what does that mean specifically? Like, it just means like regular person or something?
Regular
or
old
like
person.
Well, I mean, there were older women there. One Indiana grandma, the Mima, who went through the re-education camp from her court-appointed radical left attorney. And, she was a grandmother of 5, but there were not elderly, 60-some-odd-year-old women who were also raided by the FBI and charged with misdemeanors. So that's sort of the joke. But there were just average Americans, and it was very offensive for those people to be in the Capitol building.
I was thinking about this. 2023 is primary season. Donald Trump, presidential primary season. Donald Trump is already campaigning. He's already got that viral video where he's like, I'm going to be the 45th and 47th president of the United States. And so we know what that is. Like, if you were to ask me, I'd say they planned that because he wanted people to know he's running. He wants the funds, the donations, the interest, but he doesn't want to publicly announce he is. It's very clever. Or maybe it really was just him and some buddies were golfing and he said it, because he didn't care. But this means if Joe Biden is not going to be running for re-election, and I don't think he will be, we'll have to hear something in the next 6 or so months. Because for Donald Trump to already be gearing up, and he's doing his campaigns, he's got 122 million. The Democrats need to start raising money.
Yeah.
If Joe Biden is going to run for re-election, he needs to start gearing up now, but he's not. I don't think Joe Biden can win again. People hate him. His approval rating's in the gutter. What was the jobs report? Minus 300,000. Minus.
Yeah,
it was
exactly.
supposed to be.
Didn't
plus.
that happen during the lockdowns? Wasn't that like when everything shut down? It was like that kind of figure.
That's scary bad. But my point is,
insane.
If it is true that Joe Biden will not be running for re-election, I think by like June we're going to hear an announcement of something's going to happen.
Yeah.
Joe Biden.
Timing,
Joe Biden raised $1.69 billion for his re-election or his election campaign last year. Is that correct?
No. I'm sorry. I have to correct you.
Joe Biden and the DNC.
It's Joe Biden didn't raise the money. Anti-Trump raised the money.
Yeah.
But okay, so
yeah,
he
yeah,
$1.7 billion, and the dude sat in his basement and didn't
must be
do
nice.
interviews.
Does that
Like,
include
what was his
all
campaign?
does that include all the in-kind donations, billions from big tech who were
Right.
censoring
I don't know.
everyone and probably not?
That's scandalous. Like, what does this money go
Right.
for? Trump raised $1.96 billion. He was at least out there running around doing stuff.
So, Julie, does this strike you
Joe
as
Biden.
anything? Could it possibly be anything other than political warfare? And how bad do you think it's going to get before the election?
With the January 6th altogether,
Or
I think
just
it's going to get worse.
Everything around it. I mean,
Yeah, all of this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is going to get worse. I think it's going to get worse in 2 ways. They're going to ratchet this up. You already see the January 6th committee. They're desperate. They know their time is running down as well, right? Their months are numbered because they're going to lose the House.
Right.
So they're going to do whatever they can. They're going to issue a report, probably 2 reports. One is that will deal with the insurrectionist lawmakers. They're going to try to suggest new legislation that will deal with lawmakers who act insurrection-y in the future. But also, they're going to tie this to election integrity reform. And so this has been the basis of January 6th since the very beginning, to tie anyone who wanted election integrity, to tighten up the rules that happened in 2020 to... That's the report. That's the excuse of January 6th. Well, then we need all these reforms so this never happens again, that sort of thing. But it's also going to get worse. I'm sorry. It's going to get worse because the American people are going to find out exactly what the government did. Government actors, agencies, political actors who helped orchestrate what happened that day and execute it. And that is going to be mind-blowing to a lot of Americans.
So
the Democrats are losing so much support.
Right.
Their popularity is dropping so much. They're not going to be able to pass any of this stuff. They're going to try, but they're spinning their wheels.
But then they'll just have it out there, right? So it'll just be out there, these reports. It'll be like the Mueller report. They're still talking about the Mueller report. They want it unredacted. Like, it's over. But you have insane people on the left. You have millions of those people. They still actually think that Trump colluded with Russia, right? I mean, you could tell them anything. They still think that the Covington kid
Very
disrespected
fine
the
people,
elder
yeah.
and,
Yeah.
he should be in prison or something.
That
It
Kyle
doesn't
Rittenhouse
matter.
is a murderer.
Yeah.
It's not just the left, the political ruling class or the media. It's their followers. It's millions of our countrymen who have completely lost their minds, and they would be happy not just to have the January 6ers in prison, political prison, but all of us. This is what COVID exposed, COVID tyranny. It's what the 2020, and it's certainly what January 6th is. You have Americans who want this to happen.
So let me ask you. You seem to believe that it is going to come out how deeply involved the state was with January 6th. How do you think the American people are going to respond to this? And what do you think the government's response to their response will be?
That's a great question, because a lot of people say, well, who cares? You're going to have half of the country who is going to believe from the beginning it was an insurrection incited by Donald Trump. But you are still going to have Americans. And I think this is sort of the whole Ray Epps thing. That has sort of raised a lot of red flags for people. Who is he? Why hasn't he been charged? Why won't the FBI or Merrick Garland answer who he is? So that's raised a lot of questions. But the government's involvement was deep, and it lasted for months ahead of time. You had something called the FBI Operation Cold Snap, which was launched in the spring of 2020 to infiltrate militia groups who were planning these anti-lockdown rallies. So a lot of it goes back to lockdowns. They had informants in these militia groups. We know that for a fact. And they were responsible for concocting and executing, just like the Whitmer kidnapping probe, most of what we saw on January 6th. Not just the government, D.C. Metro Police, Capitol Police, Muriel Bowser's administration. It was a lot of independent factors, which is why they kept the Capitol intentionally insecure that day, because they didn't want thousands of National Guardsmen there saying, hey, why are you throwing flashbangs into the crowd? Why are you shooting rubber bullets at people outside? Why don't we go inside? Why don't we put up the barricades? Why don't we close the doors if you don't want them? So that is why they didn't have them there.
I think the propaganda's failed. I think what we saw with Joe Biden's collapse in popularity after Afghanistan, what we saw with the ongoing Joe Rogan attempt to censor and everything, it's just not working. And I think regular people, they're just not falling for it anymore. Especially like we read that post from the lockdown critical left saying, like, why isn't the left supporting the worker uprising?
Right.
The message is getting out. They can't control it anymore. I mean, CNN, MSNBC, their ratings are just abysmal. People don't care. They're not listening. They've lost what Mika Brzezinski said. They've lost the ability to tell people what to think.
Right.
You guys remember when she said that?
Yeah.
She was like, he thinks he's going to tell people what to think, but that's our job.
That's economic. So economic hitman wargaming here. That means that's the first stage where they're trying to bribe. If they think their propaganda is not working anymore, that means that their bribes have failed. Now they're going to go to stage 2, which is assassination. So you not personality assassinations, but like what do you call it when they try and take a character assassinations, imprisonment against people's will unjudiciously with the Patriot Act, stuff like that. We're in that stage now.
Dude, you guys got to understand how easy it is to carry out. So let me slow down. Start over. Governments all over the world assassinate. I mean, it's World War I and stuff like that. We know assassinations happen. But when it came to popular uprisings, there was a fear that you would make a martyr. And so, if you read a lot of the history books, okay, so we have to character assassinate. We have to make them not worthy of being heroes. But these days, man, I mean, first of all, there's that story. I don't know how true this is, but I remember reading some Reddit meme about the CIA's heart attack gun. You ever hear about that?
Oh yeah.
It fired like a dart with like a frozen poison that, like, when it dissolved would just kill you and look like a heart attack or whatever.
They testified under oath about that, actually.
Yeah,
I believe.
It's very, very easy to assassinate and get away with it. It's ridiculously easy. People don't understand this. They think we live in this world where, like, oh, they would be able to do that, would be able to pull it off. It's like, dude, They find a homeless guy, they give him a weapon, and they just send him off on his way. You know what I mean?
It does raise flags, though, real assassinations, which is why they go with the characters. And why that's indefinite detention against, like, where people can't even, like, speak out. They're in solitary. So you don't even know they're being detained.
But this is why I bring this up, because they've lost control of the narrative.
That freaks me out.
If they
what will they do next?
Look at they try to
regain control. Drone bombs over cities, like that's the third stage of economic
when
hitman,
you have
full scale.
Yeah, but they're not going to do that against their own.
I don't
cities.
think so. But you never think the government's going to do that against their own cities. You never think that.
All right, okay, let me make my point. They need you to work to produce things for the system which they want to control. It's like if somebody wants to own a house, they're not going to blow it up because they can't have it. So a crazy person would, and maybe there are crazy people in government, but the idea is, how can we take control of this resource? We don't want to destroy it. They're willing to tolerate some loss. But my point is, they've lost control of the narrative, so, maybe powerful people, and I'm not saying the grand conspiracies or anything, I'm just saying powerful people get mad and they can be dangerous.
They have military bases all over the earth, and they're afraid of losing it to China, the hegemony, to go to the power to China. So they're desperately trying to crack down on American dissent to maintain the global military autocracy.
I do not agree.
Yeah, I don't think they're worried about China at all.
No, they're
helping
helping
China.
Yeah, Joe Biden.
Maybe it's a different level of people.
We had who do we have on who talked about Joe Biden's cabinet?
Peter Schweizer, I think.
No. Well, we just had him on. Yeah,
right,
yes, he did talk about Biden and China, but we had someone on a while ago talking about Joe Biden's cabinet has somebody who is very, very pro-China and pro-trade with China and all that stuff.
Remember.
And if you look back at like the Clinton administration, there's all of those ties and all those connections.
Yeah.
So,
okay. Well, I do believe that there's a global movement to unify everything under like a socio-communist kind of corporatism.
Borg?
Yeah, a Borgish state.
Let's figure out the acronym for that.
I think that there are people that with American nationalists that are afraid of losing American control of the global military force. I could be wrong about that, but I feel like people are they're desperate to maintain control.
Yeah.
I'd like to ask you one more question. Just about, you sort of got into what you think the government's role in this is. When people start to recognize that, how do you think they're going to respond to people recognizing it?
I think we're in a position now, let's say this was 5 years ago or maybe even 10, no one would, I think, accept that the government was capable of doing this. That the FBI, the intelligence community, the national security state, that, okay, they'll screw around with people, but they're not going to actually have this full-scale operation to shut down what happened on January 6th and then use that to weaponize all of the tools of war against American citizens. I do think, and I think it does play into the COVID tyranny, that people are recognizing that our government is run, not just political leaders, but the people who populate these agencies, the nameless, faceless. I mean, they're Anthony Fauci's, but there's thousands of them who are willing to do anything. They know that they can get away with it. They don't care about your kids. They actually want your kids punished. They don't care about your business. They don't care about your future. They will do anything to keep a hold of power and to get rid of not just threats like Donald Trump or his family, his cabinet members, but even his 75 million voters. So I do think that people are going to be shocked when there's more information, that the information already is coming out in these trials. This is why they've kind of delayed these trials. This is why they're keeping a lot of these men held behind bars, because they don't want them telling their story. But you can't do that forever, right? We learned from Russiagate. We've also learned from COVID. They can only get away with fooling people, concealing evidence, getting their narrative out there for so long before it just crumbles. And then everyone goes, oh, wait a minute, this was all BS to begin with. And it was, we had really bad people in charge of it. Yes.
Absolutely. I think one key difference here, and I'm glad you mentioned Russiagate, because for me, that was really the red pill with respect to the deep state. Before that, if someone claimed that the deep state, or that there was a deep state and it was colluding against the sitting president, I would have said that sounds a little bit crazy.
Seamus, you're crossing anti-Semite point.
Oh, that's right. The anti-Semitic point of no return on the conspiracy.
How will you get back
hierarchy.
down?
So if you believe that there is
a deep state, you're
a
anti-Semitic.
bureaucratic state,
right?
Administrators and people who work in government who are there throughout various administrations and exert influence.
You may be right.
According to this researcher, you believe in an anti-Semitic conspiracy theory.
And she does research on TikTok, so it's very important.
Of
work.
course, yeah.
But no, I mean it's true. And that was a big red pill moment for me. But the difference here is that with the Russiagate scenario, they were going specifically after people who were acting within the political system.
Right.
But with January 6th, they're going after ordinary civilians. So I'm curious about what the fallout is going to be here, because with Russiagate, they just stopped talking about it and it disappeared. I wonder if it's going to be more difficult for them to get away with that, given your average person feels more threatened by what they've just done here.
Right.
Well, the feds raided some random woman's home. Remember that? Do you know about that up in Alaska?
They've raided hundreds of people's homes. But yes,
totally uninvolved people.
Well, they were there, but they had the wrong person.
Right.
But I mean, they're raiding people. They're doing military-style FBI raids with armed agents, pre-dawn raids with military SWAT teams. They have trucks with battering rams. They're aiming rifles at children. They're aiming them at elderly women. They've dragged a disabled veteran, Thomas Caldwell, through the snow and handcuffed him. I mean, the stories of what this FBI has done. And it's not just the top of the FBI, right? It's throughout. It's every single.
Well, they need enforcers.
56 field offices have been involved in this, and they are arresting people every single week. They're trying to get to, in my prediction is they're trying to get to 1,000 defendants by the middle of the summer. So this could be the Democrats' huge talking point. But to your point, Seamus, this is ruining people's lives, and it's not just the family that it happens to. It's their whole neighborhood knows, their their coworkers know, their church knows. Everyone sees this. It is a war on terror, not just how the tools of government authority are being used, but it's also a message to everyone. If you dissent, this is going to happen to you.
Yep. It sounds so similar to the start of like the Bolshevik Revolution or the rise of the Soviet Union. These are the stories that I was told by my friends who grew up in as children in communism, and the stories they were told by their parents about how people it got to the point where if you said one bad thing about the party or the government, you were taken away. We're not there yet. We still have shows like this. But we often talk about, when we compare things to history, at what point did people say it's time to leave Germany? Or Spain, for that matter. Spain often gets left out of these conversations, the Spanish Civil War. Communists fighting fascists, and then you get military rule for like generations. At what point do you leave? What do you do? So many people thought it couldn't happen here, and they stayed in their countries, and they paid the ultimate price.
Well, and I think
I'm telling you to leave, Seamus. Get
No,
out.
I know. You're always dropping these weird little
Canada.
hints on me. No, but I think it's not just about people. It's not just about people leaving. It's about people, the people who stay, knowing when it's time to fight, to stand up for their country, and to say, this is wrong. We're going to speak out against it. We're going to resist it.
We got going for us here is that we're not coming out of a monarchy like the Bolsheviks were. The Russian Revolution was fighting against a monarchy, so they didn't have much choice but to fight with physical arms. We have a democratic process of free speech and things like that in place that can protect our ability to diplomatically coerce the system.
And you're right. And that's why I think one of the reasons they're scared, losing narrative control, means that this upcoming election is panic mode for the establishment. It's mostly Democrats. It is many Republicans, because the populist, surge in the Republican Party is not something the establishment wants. But to your point, Julie, what you were saying about how they're ramping things up for the summer, because they're worried if they lose the House and the Senate, they're not just going to lose the House and the Senate to Republicans. They're going to lose the House and the Senate to Republicans like Lily Tang Williams, who we had on the show,
We can only
who is like,
and
this
hope.
country is becoming communist and we have to stop it. Or Marjorie Taylor Greene or Lauren Boebert.
Yes, wouldn't that be great?
And
that's right.
And that's what they're terrified of, because it's actually happening.
But we still have a very weak Republican leadership in the House and Senate, and people are very afraid, even when they take over, that this current leadership will not be capable or willing to turn the J6 committee 180 degrees and aim it at the people who have perpetrated this. They don't want to expose it. It's the same thing. A lot of this goes back to Russiagate, because how we got here is that nobody was held accountable for what happened in Russiagate, except for Michael Sussman, big deal.
And Ukraine Gate.
And Ukraine. Yeah.
You
Oh,
can
no,
do it,
we've got
yeah.
the Vindmans, now he's suing Trump and he's like on CNN and so is his wife. No one's held accountable. So it just got worse and worse and worse. And so I say we went 4 years from the FBI ambushing Mike Flynn in the White House to ambushing the Hubers, ambushing veterans in their homes. It only took 4 years. But why? Because no one was held criminally responsible for what they did, which was perpetrate the biggest political fraud in American history up until January 6th. And everybody's off so far. We've got some
Amen.
drips out of the Durham investigation, but where's that going to go?
Well, maybe there's going to be a big surge in November.
Right.
But not just that, it's the state elections, the governorships as well. And we are very, very close to a convention of states. The state level Republicans are very, very different from the federal Republican leadership. Right. So that could be something big. Some people have said it's a bad idea. A lot of people are saying a convention of states is a good idea because then the states can just take the power, change the Constitution, and make big moves. But I think the establishment knows that our processes, the processes that were set up by the founding fathers, work and can save us.
Well, they're not working now. I mean, that's for sure. Especially, there's been no oversight. I mean, there has not.
Just to interrupt, I disagree. I think the issue is that culturally, no one's been willing to stand up and use what's been given to us because they've been too comfortable and complacent. But now that things have gotten this bad and the narrative has been shattered, there are mechanisms in place that even the establishment can't stop.
I hope that you're right. I'm a little more skeptical about that because I see firsthand how, everyone basically has been silent in the face of what's happening with January 6th. You're talking about not just the political end of it in Congress. You have this illegitimate committee issuing subpoenas, and they're working hand in hand with the DOJ for contempt of Congress charges, et cetera. You have Joe Biden, for the first time ever, U.S. president, has denied executive privilege to his predecessor. He did it twice. He did it based on the fact that January 6th was so unprecedented, and it went all the way to the courts. And what did the Supreme Court do? Okay, we're upholding it. So you have district judges, circuit judges, and now the Supreme Court, who's going along with the left because they're afraid. So there has been no oversight in the legislative branch of the executive branch, none. And it has to, but if they take over, they have to make sure they do it this time because they haven't done it.
What has to happen is people need to primary all of these
Absolutely.
establishment Republican types and bring in more people like Marjorie Taylor Greene.
I absolutely agree. I mean, I wish we had, 230 of her because she actually will do it and she feels passionate about it. But there's still a fear factor there. And I'm afraid that if the Republicans do take the House, the Senate is useless. Senate's not going to, you could have 100 Republican senators. They're not going to do anything because they're all basically Lindsey Graham or Mitt Romney.
Yeah.
They are.
Yep.
So it has to happen in the House. And they have to do the same thing. They have to go and zero out. They have to zero out DOJ's budget. You have to zero out the FBI. We are zeroing you out until you are done. You're done taking these. The trials are over. No, we're not paying for any more prosecutors. We're not paying for any more arrests. We're not doing no more subpoenas to big tech. You're done with this. Will they do it? You have to do something that drastic.
If people go out and vote in the primaries, go out and vote locally, and make sure establishment politicians don't win, then yeah. It's gonna be a crazy. It's not gonna be the apocalypse. That'll be if Trump wins again in 2024 because he's gonna be off the leash. But if populist, pro-America types win their primaries, and then the Republicans take the House, and you get a large portion of the House Republicans as people who say we're done with this and it's time to go on the offensive for once, then you're going to see some pushback. You're going to see, I think, the establishment plan January 6th, done. I think you're going to see Republicans making a bunch of moves with their subpoena power. But it only happens if people go out and vote in primaries. Primaries.
Amen.
That's right.
I mean, it's true. It's such a disaster. Only our current Republican leadership could fail to turn the fact that the deep state has literally targeted their own constituents into a political advantage. It's insane.
And you're going to watch Republicans in a few weeks. They are going to continue the funding of the government, the same government that is turning the weapons of war against their own constituents and them.
Yeah, exactly.
Perfect example. The Congress, including most Republicans, just voted last year to give Capitol Police $2 billion more dollars. What did Capitol Police do? They turned around. They opened up an intelligence unit for the Capitol Police. You know, the guys who like make sure you put your purse through the scanner or tell you, oh, the Capitol's that way and there's, you know, Cannon office building. All of a sudden, they're like, they have a bunch of spies in this office. And they're not only spying on lawmakers, their staff, they're spying on their donors. They're compiling dossiers. Well, why are they doing that? For the same thing they did in Russiagate, Ukrainegate, name it. They have the authority to do it. They're unchecked, they're unaccountable, and they're going to leak that information to the press, right? So all of a sudden this summer, you're going to see terrible stories coming out sourced to anonymous intelligence officials, which happens to be this Capitol Police intelligence unit that Republicans voted to fund.
Yep.
They never learn.
Thanks for checking out this segment from the Timcast IRL podcast. If you want to watch live, you can check out this channel Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. And don't forget to smash that like button, subscribe to this channel, and if you want more unfiltered and uncensored content with all of these guests, go to timcast.com and become a member. All of these guests you know and love in exclusive segments on our website where we are unrestricted in what we talk about, so you'll definitely not want to miss it. Thanks for hanging out. We'll see you all next time.